Welcome to the continuation of our presentation on Miriam and Grace's Part 4, The Changing Landscape of Adult Learning. This presentation was created by Comfort, Katie, and Edison for EDD 810BL, Communication in Adult Learning Settings. Key points from Chapter 23, The Meaning and Roles of Emotions in Adult Learning. Ways in which emotions is manifest in adults' learning. Adult learners experience an array of emotions ranging from positive and energizing to negative and distracting. Hence, their response may include expression of anger over something in an educational environment or evoked by the learning environment itself. For example, emotions may be elicited by the critical requirement of learning a given task with the anticipation of being evaluated or tested. Another example may be the nature of the curriculum content. For example, the subject of math and perhaps sciences may contribute to adult learner emotions. The nature and meaning may vary considerably depending on the author of literature one reads, as well as the discipline one represents. A representation of both the experience of particular body states and our interpretation of construction of these states mediated social cultural process. Quote from Miriam and Grace, page 354. Emotions are fundamentally social construction that entirely depends on the particular context in which they are manifest. Thus, emotions are experienced, understood, and named via the social and cultural processes. End quote. It is a social cultural product learned wholly and constructed through acculturation. Role of emotions in humans may include reflect on self-awareness of one's own feelings and emotions as well as those of others, manage and use in our encounters with the outer world, development of moral knowledge, help us discern and make our way through our worlds, represent strategies for living judgments we make within the world, renders meaning to our lives, enables imaginative engagement with the world, integrating emotions with alternative ways of knowing in adult learning and higher education, which may include, quote, programs for academically unprepared adults, adult learners returning to higher education, multicultural education, online education programs, workplace learning, informal learning, and the arts in adult learning. Holistic approaches to emotions in adult learning represent what we may essentially consider as ways of knowing that challenge historical dominance of reason and scientific ways of knowing, including the following theoretical frameworks: experiential learning, whole person learning, embodied learning, transformative learning, spiritual experience. End quote. Thus, emotion constitutes our subjectivity and sense of self in adult learners. In more depth, emotions and alternative ways of knowing in adult learning. This offers a vision for integrating emotions within alternative ways of knowing in adult and adult educations as a whole. Experiential learning refers to an encounter with the world and involves emotional dimensions of our own experiences arising from emotions and feelings within our own learning contexts. Whole person learning. This is a more holistic understanding of learning through experience and the foundational role of affect in the process. Embodied learning focuses on being in the world that is inseparable from our bodies. Having somatic or bodily awareness and cognizant of the body as a source of knowledge about self and relationship to the world. It is characterized by strong feelings that convey deep and intimate connections with the world. Transformative learning incorporate aspects of all of the other four approaches. Represents changes or shifts in our understanding of ourselves and our relationship with the world. spiritual experience, deep and abiding search for meaning associated with making connection with something greater than self, divinity, or godliness. Dirks, quote, maintains that it is through acknowledging and possessing these emotional and physical reactions that we're able to connect with the self. This dimension to learn is often spontaneous and serendipitous, but it is frequently what makes learning so profound and meaningful. Key points for Chapter 24, Adult Education and the Mass Media in the Age of Globalization. McLuhan in the late 70s studied the impact of TV, radio, or news, and quote, that shapes the messages that consumers receive. Whoever controls the medium is in control of the message, end quote, page 363. Mass media messages influence the way people respond. Guy argues that, quote, the power of the media to influence the thought and actions of people is at a level unprecedented in human history. Additionally, he argues that the concentrated power of the media has the consequences of steering consumers, learners, away from critical, socially conscious forms of learning and social action. Media and technology have combined so as to produce a powerful global communications network that shapes our relationships and our ideas about the world in which we live. End quote, page 363. Mass media is an informal education for adult learners. Global communication is instant. Large-scale opportunities for owners of the media to create an environment to enforce and manipulate messages. Fewer and fewer owners of media, the Big Five, Viacom, News Corporation, Time Warner, General Electric, and Walt Disney, quote, are the major players in the mass media industry that control such media outlets as television, radio, publishing, magazines, cinema, newspapers, bookstores, and video stores, end quote, page 364. Lowe discusses the political and cultural studies of media. Political studies stresses analyzing and, quote, mapping out human relationships and the way some individuals gain more power than others through their positioning relative to others. Therefore, power relationships between individuals and historically constituted groups are fundamental to understanding the struggle to control the production and dissemination of meanings, end quote, page 365. Cultural studies equal how we internalize messages, and these messages impact our culture. Cultures concentrate their meaning and can be distinct. The evolution of global network capitalism from earlier information ages, such as the managerial era of capitalism, which had identifiable decision makers, boards, managers. Now, global networks, it is much more difficult to identify the origin of the media message. Market forces are central to consumerism. An increased desire to make more profits increases the influence of media. Quote, cultural industries give rise to two things, cultural homogeneity and predictability in cultural taste. Mass production creates cultural homogeneity. Producers depend on predictability of cultural taste and limit the choice and is dependent on increasing profits. Consumers are inundated with media images, which increase wants that some consumers cannot afford and end up borrowing to purchase more products. Manipulating citizens distracts from fundamental questions about society and has political and cultural implications. Adorno and Horkheimer, 1991, argue that, quote, authentic culture holds the key to unlock the prison house of mass culture, end quote, page 367. As cultural groups internalize media-driven messages, they begin to lack the ability to not reproduce these messages, and the messages become their own, not the prescribed media's. Quote, commercialization devalues ethnic culture by turning it into just another commodity, like athletic shoes. Instead, mass production entails colonization of independent thought and critical consciousness. End quote, page 368. Marcuse, 1991, also identifies the control of the media. Quote, thus we are confronted with a dilemma. Given the choice to critique, to condemn, to combat the dehumanizing forces of the market-driven global media, we must forego the pleasures that accompany the capitalist values of consumerism and materialisms that influence behavior, end quote, page 368. More recent research support Adorno and Horkheimer, but claim it is much more complex than what they had presented. Mass media, mass culture, and adult education outline 4 concepts. Quote, number 1, the mass media as an informal education. 2, the media as a pedagogical tool. 3, the media as a threat to diversity. And lastly, 4, the media as a threat to democracy. End quote, page 373. Adult educators should take a more critical stance toward the mass media and their power to shape the social arrangements and consciousness of individuals who would otherwise be asserting their rights and demand for equity, were it not for the power and influence of the global media through the culture industries. End quote, page 375. Quote, in short, scholars, activists, and practitioners should increasingly focus on the mass media and their potential for promoting and inhibiting learning aimed at a progressive social change. End quote. Key points from Chapter 25, the final chapter in Miriam and Grace, Part 4. Non-Western perspectives on learning and knowing. Non-Western perspectives differ from Western perspectives. Globalization connects the world, the global economy, technology, travel, and immigration and migration. Western versus non-Western dichotomy is a very Western concept. Indigenous people live on Western lands, and non-Western is seen as superior or the opposite, but is it really? Learning and knowing from non-Western worldviews. Learning is communal. Quote, from this communal perspective, learning is the responsibility of all members of the community because it is through this learning that the community itself can develop. End quote, page 381. African, Buddhist, Hindu, China, adopting a learning society now, are also examples of learning as communal, along with religions such as Islam. Community versus the individual. Community is the ideal. Learning is lifelong and informal. The Western view equals vocational goal to increase market share and competitiveness. The non-Western view equals communal and individual growth and knowledge to contribute to the community through problem solving. Learning is holistic and includes the mind, body, and the spirit. Non-Western approaches to adult learning can influence our practice as leaders. Quote, our exposure to non-Western perspectives of learning and knowing can influence our practice as educators in 3 ways: approaching learning holistically, vaulting learning embedded in everyday life, and being responsive to learners from other cultures. End quote, page 386. Conclusion. Our exposure to non-Western perspectives on learning and knowing broadens our understanding of adult learning and enhances our practice as educators in a global society. We hope that this chapter is just a starting point, encouraging you to look around and notice more diverse ways of learning and knowing. A more inclusive practice can enrich our lives and the lives of learners with whom we work. End quote. Page 387. Thank you for taking time to listen to both of our presentations on the key points. Please continue through the Padlet to have more experiences with this material.